Good evening and welcome to News Review. Spain is to issue cross-frontier workers with a special pass that will enable them to jump the queue at the Gibraltar-La Línea border. The permits will be issued to Spanish residents who have a contract to work in Gibraltar and residents of the ROC who work in Spain.
Clearly, there are many more Spaniards who work in Gibraltar than vice versa, and the passes will be limited to residents of La Línea, Algeciras, San Roque, Los Barrios and Castellar de la Frontera. The details of the scheme are published in Spain's Boletín Oficial del Estado. It involves allowing permit holders to access Gibraltar or Spain via the red channel that is normally reserved for vehicles with goods to declare. A similar arrangement will apply to pedestrians. The permits will be valid for a maximum of 1 year. Spain says this measure is in line with the recommendations of the European Union for easing frontier flow. It's been criticized, however, by the chairman of the Socio-Cultural Association of Spanish Workers in Gibraltar, ASTEG. Juan José Uceda has described it as discriminatory.
Meanwhile, with informational posters already up, later on in the week it was revealed that cross-frontier workers could already apply for the new pass system. According to Spanish press reports, the ruling Partido Popular has set aside over €7 million for the project, with works set to start in September. The PP's Antonio Sanz says the investment will bring about an intelligent frontier which will do away with queues. However, the government said it was in close discussions with its legal advisers and with the British government on the issue. Number 6 said any proposed solution towards a free-flowing frontier must also encompass EU nationals and others who are not workers, like tourists and residents on both sides. And the opposition said it was deeply concerned, claiming the system is simply a method to appease Spanish workers while maintaining or even increasing controls at the frontier for non-workers and tourists. And for their part, the defenders of Gibraltar said the proposed pass system would be inherently discriminatory towards Gibraltarian and people from other nationalities residing in Gibraltar. The pressure group says Spain's latest idea attempts to plant a seed of doubt in the minds of cross-frontier workers as to who is to blame for the problems at the border. We were down at the frontier earlier this week to speak to some of those crossing over after a day's work in Gibraltar.
Posters are already up at the frontier letting cross-border workers know how to register for a pass, and many of those we spoke to were well aware of the proposed system. Opinions were mixed.
Yo creo que sí, algo ayudará. Que no hagan cola, por lo menos, yo qué sé.
Aquí todo el mundo tiene que tener el mismo derecho, tanto gibraltareño como español, a poder pasar a tener... Porque yo trabajo, tengo que tardar menos que una persona que venga a disfrutar de Gibraltar, no lo veo bien.
Todavía podría haber contrabando, ¿no? Y los controles van a seguir en la verja. O sea que el sentido que tiene, a mí todo lo que sea el gobierno del PP no me parece bien en absoluto. O sea que hasta ahí llego.
I think it's a good idea, definitely. If it's going to cut queues and waiting times.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, if it helps people get home quicker, yeah, by all means.
It's been suggested that it's discriminatory because it'll only affect sort of cross-frontier workers but
well,
not tourists.
Well, it seems that way, isn't it? If you're a tourist, you come in, you've got to queue up, if you've got a pass, you can go out.
But do you feel it will be overall a good measure?
How can you tell? I mean, 30 years I came into Gibraltar, queued up, and 30 years I queued up to go out. And most of the time we're doing it still now, so in 30 years nothing's changed. I don't think a little bit of paper's going to make much difference.
Quieren discriminar de que pasen los que se llevan el dinero de Gibraltar para allá, eso, un pase, y los que vienen a dejar dinero en Gibraltar, eso, que tengan que esperar en la cola. Eso no. O todo o ninguno.
I think we must not lose sight of the fact that this is clearly a divide and conquer policy here, whereby they seem to have separated the aspirations and desires of the frontier workers to what are essentially people who are Gibraltarian or local or resident in Gibraltar, and separating the two. By consenting to this idea, we are consenting to isolated punishment. That is what we're consenting to, and we're kind of throwing up into the air all of the legal frameworks by which people actually cross, between different countries. it's tantamount to, throwing away your passport and saying, okay, I'll just sign whatever paperwork needs to be signed with the Spanish government that will let me go through back and forth without hindrance, whereby everybody else will still be stuck in the queue.
Some believe that the system's main focus is tax-related, an attempt by Spain's revenue department to make sure cross-frontier workers are registered as such.
Yo creo que la medida es para controlar el tema de los sueldos de los trabajadores españoles que están aquí en Gibraltar trabajando. No creo que sea para un pase, para una cola, para ahorrarnos que no existan colas aquí.
More to do with the Spanish frontier workers. They're trying to catch frontier workers that are not declaring taxes. There's over 10,000 Spanish workers come in each day. A lot of them aren't registered for tax in Spain, or they are registered for tax, but they just don't pay it. So obviously they're not declaring the money and they're just trying to catch them. So unless you're 100% legal in Spain, I wouldn't advise anybody getting it.
The defenders of Gibraltar say the system is a distortion of the EU's recommendations. They support the Gibraltar government's position that any proposed solution to the politically motivated delays at the frontier must also encompass EU nationals and others who are not workers, such as tourists and residents on both sides. It's a view that's echoed by the Group for a Humanitarian Frontier, who call this a divide-and-conquer tactic.
Well, above all, we find that it's complete discrimination. As a humanitarian frontier group, that means everybody. And before being a worker, you are a human being. So everybody has the right to use a certain channel or whatever. If there's a special measure, it should be dedicated to everybody.
It's early days yet, with the government in consultation with its legal advisors and the British government on the issue. But with Spain already instructing people to sign up, to register or not to register is a question many on both sides of the frontier may already be asking themselves.
In other news, a radical anti-capitalist Spanish union announced plans to protest in Gibraltar on the 29th of August, referring to the demonstration as an occupation. The Andalusian Workers' Union refers to Gibraltar as a fiscal paradise and a colonial enclave, and plans to protest its use as a British military base. It also accuses the British authorities of not respecting the rights of fishermen who, it says, have fished here all their lives. It was announced on Facebook by union spokesman Diego Cañamero. Perhaps oddly, Mr. Cañamero took part in a cross-border protest against the frontier queues in January this year. That was organised by the Group for a Humanitarian Frontier, who told GBC they felt let down.
The reaction of the platform has been of completely being let down by that union in particular. We supported them in the Almoraima demonstration, and we've gone to Seville with them, hand by hand. And the fact that they suddenly turn around, probably from a marketing point of view, just to get some more people reading their principles, is using us as an scapegoat. Well, not as an scapegoat, but as an excuse. And which is the way that we're always being, we're used by the Spanish government, we're just constantly being used. We are completely let down by him. We know that internally within this union, within SAT, there are people that are against this, this action that's going to be taking place apparently on the 29th of August. And we've been contacting them, and we want to try and get a meeting together to actually show them that they're basing everything on air, that they're going to come out of it worse, I think, because they're just going to be shown up, really. We feel let down, completely let down.
The European Commission has tacitly acknowledged that Spain has taken a risk in shifting away from political and diplomatic pressure on Gibraltar towards actions that are challengeable in law. This was according to an article in the Gibraltar Chronicle newspaper.
In last week's ruling, the EU's Directorate General on Environment said it was unable to identify any breach of EU law in respect of, among other things, bunkering activities. The Chronicle says EU officials relied exclusively on Gibraltar's satisfactory management of environmental risks associated with bunkering in the waters around the rock. Some of these waters were designated by Spain as her own without informing the British government. By contrast, the EU acknowledges the UK's openness to fully cooperate with Spain on such issues. Last week, the government welcomed the EU's findings that no laws had been broken on bunkering activities, the East Side project, or in creating the artificial reef off the runway. It sought to recognise the work that the relevant local agencies, competent authorities and ministries do in order to ensure that when Gibraltar's actions are put under the microscope, we are found to have acted properly at both a substantive and technical level.
And we'll be back with more of this week's stories after the break.